Hello and welcome. Thank you for popping into my channel. If you are new here, please like and subscribe for me. If you find this content helpful, hit that notification bell so that you don't miss out on the next video. Comment below with anything that you need help with or topics you'd like me to cover. And head to my website, consultingninja.tech, to check out the resources section I've put together there. With that out of the way, we are going to get into the first in a series covering APIs. Now, this first video, we are going to fetch some data from an API and display it to our website and store it in some local state. I'm going to be using Vite to power this. I'll leave a link in the description of this video for Vite if you're not familiar with that. And as always, the source code for this project will be available in my GitHub repository, so I'll link in the description for that as well. The follow-up videos, we're going to create a backend using Node and Express, and then we're going to connect the two together. So stay tuned. This is all going to be really awesome. I'm super excited to be doing it, and thank you for being here to watch it. With that out of the way, let's get right to it and create a Vite starter application. Vite is pretty sweet. It is all I use now for front end. Let's call this fetch data and keep it all small, otherwise you'll have to choose a package name too. I'm going to use React, but I'll probably do a Svelte video on this later because Svelte is awesome. And I'm going to choose TypeScript, but I'll keep the TypeScript to a minimum. Now let's get in there and install our dependencies. While that's going, I want to talk about this website I found called Apipheny. It's supposed to be a play on words. Obviously, they're peddling a service here. That's not why I'm pointing you guys in this direction. I'm pointing you here because their homepage, when you first come to apipheny.io/free-API, I'll leave a link in the description for this website, but I wanted to point it out because they have like 30, 60, 90 different APIs that are free that you can use. If you don't know how to use an API, if you're uncomfortable with this stuff, you need to be practicing it. And a good way to practice it is to use different ones. So come here and just start at number 1, pull data from this API, do something with it in your application, and then save that source code somewhere, create another file, and go down and do it with each and every single one of these, because you need to be able to get comfortable with this. In our applications, we frequently focus on creating visually cool stuff, which is great, but in the real world, if you want to do this for a living, you need to know how to manipulate data. You're going to have data coming from some sort of backend or API, and you need to know how to get it, how to manipulate it, and then how to display it. And the format is going to be all over the place, and I'm going to point that out as we get going here and give you a good example of what I'm talking about when I say it's all over the place. I'm also going to use one of these. There's one in here, I can't remember where, it has a fake user. So let's get back to our application. Should be done installing, but check out that website, apipheny.io/free-API. All right, so we have all of our dependencies installed. Let's get in here. Let's fire up our development server. You can type npm run dev or just type Vite, since that's what it's doing under the hood. And inside of our source code, let's just start chopping this thing up. So inside of this fetch data project, let's open this up inside of our app. We are not going to need anything except for, let's leave the card, delete the paragraph in the bottom here, and we'll delete all of the links, and let's create a couple of H1s here. We have to have one of these that says Consulting Ninja because that's the channel name. And then down here, this is Vite plus React plus fetch. And then once we add the backend, we'll update that to say plus Express. And we don't need the logo. You can get rid of that. So go ahead and give that a save. This state here, let's change this to say a user. Well, actually, it's a random user. Let's call this something funny. Let's call this rando, and then set rando. We're gonna get a rando and we're gonna set a rando. And then this is going to not start with anything, but we are going to tell React that this is going to be of type object. It's a generic type, but it's better than nothing. Now let's create a function, and this function, this is where we get to the nuts and bolts of fetch. Okay, so this is the first thing we're doing. We are fetching our data from our API. There's a whole bunch of different ways to do this depending on what your specific application or use case is, but what we're going to do here is we're going to create a function that fetches the API, and then we're going to attach that function to a button. And so we're going to do this on click, essentially. So let's create that function. Let's call it get rando, and we're going to get ourselves a rando right off the street. So we're going to pull them in. Okay, anonymous function, and what this is going to be is a fetch, and this is the most basic fetch. Random user.me/API/. Now, the default fetch takes no other parameters than this. It is simply a URL that it pings. It's going to use get under the hood by default. You don't need to attach anything. This is the bare bones basic you can get, just pinging an API without any other parameters. You don't have to manually set headers and all that other stuff that you can do. This is plain Jane, okay? So there we're hitting our API, https randomuser.me/API/. And what that's going to do is give us a response. A response is not the JSON object that we're looking for. It is the entire response from the server. So in order to get to pull out the values, we have to do some things with that response. And now let me also point out that fetch is promise base, and so what we're getting is not the data, it is not just that response, but it is those things wrapped inside of a promise. So if you're not familiar with promises, pay attention, you're going to get some experience right now. So after you fetch, you just chain a .then, and then what we're doing is taking that response and sending it to another function. And then inside this function, we're just going to return the response in JSON format. Okay? Now that we've converted it to JSON format, we're going to add another .then. And this one is going to have the data in it. Here, if there is data, let's set our rando to be a new object spread out with data.results sub-0. So for some reason this API is kind of funny like that, but it doesn't just return a JSON object, it returns an array, but the array only contains one item in it. So I'm not quite sure why they decided to do that, but this is what I'm saying when I'm telling you that you need to get comfortable looking at APIs, manipulating APIs, and just getting your hands down into the data, because you have to look at what's coming back in order to determine, hey, this is an array, but it's an array with one item. The one item is the object that we're looking for, and so that's how I knew to put this in this dot results and then sub-0, because I looked at it, I played around with it and spit out the values and was able to determine what was going on there. Now, we could also check the response and make sure that the response was inside of an acceptable range. We're not going to get into too much error checking just now. We could also do a console.log here and spit the data out. So you could do a like that and just spit the data out. We don't have to do that. This is going to work, so we can just leave that out for clarity's sake. And then the last thing we want to do is we want to catch any errors. And what we're going to do is here take the error that's returned and run it into this function, and we're just going to console.log error fetching the rando, and then we'll just print out the error object with that. So there we have our wonderful function that is getting us a rando from the random user API. Pretty cool stuff. Now let's do something with it. So if the data is there, then we're going to set our state. Let's do something fun with that data. So inside of our card, let's do something crazy like this. This is another good example of success, failure. What I mean here is, so we only want to do this if random is there, and we're going to take object.entries, okay, and pass it random, question mark dot map. And if random has a value, oh, and I called it random, sorry, rando. We're not working with random, rando. Rando. So if rando has a value, then we're going to pump that value into object.entries, and we're going to manipulate all of the key value pairs. And this is going to be another opportunity to show you guys how, when working with APIs, sometimes the data comes back pretty willy-nilly. And let's do a return. And what are we returning? Let's return a div. And inside of here, let's do a paragraph tag. And this will be key. And then brackets so that we can pull out a value. Now, if you're not familiar with object.entries, what this is doing is pulling the key value. So entry is actually an array where the first item is the key and the second item is the value. So here we'll do entry sub 0, and that's going to be the key. We also have to pass, for React, we need to pass this a key. And so let's just spit out the same thing there. Whoops. Let's spit this out there because we know that it's going to be a unique value. If you were doing this in a production application, you would want to make sure that your key definitely is something that is unique, or your React application will not know which one of these children to update should it need to do so, and you will get an error in your console. And although the error will be the least of your concerns because you're going to get all kinds of weird behavior. Let's call this key value container. We're gonna do very minimal styling here. And then let's copy this and do one more down here. And let's say a value. And let's give this one a class name as well of values. We don't even care about the other one. We just want to make sure that some of these are going to be fairly lengthy. So inside of here, here's where things start to get funny again. And this again comes back. I'm driving this point home for you guys because this will come back to bite you if you don't pay attention when you're working with APIs. The data coming back is willy-nilly. And what do I mean? I mean that inside of this object, the values are not consistent. Some of them are strings, some of them are numbers, and some of them are other JSON objects. So you can't just spit out a JSON object, as we know. And so we need to do a little bit further analysis on the value that we're looking at here. So let's do a type of on the entry, and here is where we're updating the index to look at the actual value. And then we want to check this. We want to check to see if this is an object. If it's an object, then we need to JSON.stringify that object. Now you could get crazier and get all nutso and start doing some other crazy stuff in here, but we're just going to keep this basic. So we're just going to stringify the object if it is there, if it is an object, and if it's not, then we're just going to string the entry. So if it's an object, then we need to convert that object to a string to print it out to our screen. If it's not an object, meaning if it's just some random number or whatever, sometimes I think there's some SHA values in here, we're just going to convert them to strings, which JavaScript is super helpful for. Now let's make ourselves a fancy shiny button, and I like to use inputs for this. If you don't, well, type in the comment section why not. I've always found this to be my preferred way. I'm not really sure why. I just like to be able to type the type, and the value here is what is the text that's going to be displayed. Let's call this get our rando, and then we're just going to put this on click, and the on click is an anonymous function that takes our get rando, and then we just need to close off that function. All right, pretty cool stuff. Are you guys with me so far? Let me know in the comments if I'm moving too quickly. I don't like to make these videos too long. Again, the source code is available. Let's, inside of our app.css, just do three really quick things. just three. Okay, all we're going to do is change the padding on this, knock it down one, and then add two classes. Let's do keyval container. And all we're going to do here is do a display of grid, and then tell it to make two grid template columns of auto and auto. And then our values, let's just set a width on those of 40 view width, just so that it doesn't spill too much. Let's give that a save, and let's go look at our work. There we have, I'm not sure why the hot module reload did not work just there. That's interesting. I may have to do a bug report for Vite. So we have our updated header of Vite plus React, and we have our button. Let's hit get rando and see what happens. Here we have our information. So pretty cool. So here is every key, the key, gender, the value, female, and then you can see here what I was talking about. Here we have a key of name, but the value is actually an object containing three more properties: a title, a first, and a last. And you can see here, I'm not sure what language that is, but thank goodness for json.stringify. So there we have our fetch, and you have successfully now fetched data from an API that contains all sorts of crazy different kinds of data, and we've brought that data in, we've done our thing with it, and displayed it back out to the browser. I hope that this video has been helpful to you guys. If it was, please don't forget to like and subscribe. Comment below with your thoughts on this, and stay tuned because, as I said, this is the first in a series. We're also going to create our own backend and populate with some users and send those back instead. So this is going to be really cool. Until next time, you guys have a great day.